Hello YouTube, welcome to Flight Level 240, where I bring you the perspective and expertise of a real-world pilot into the sim world. In today's video, we'll start off at San Luis Obispo Airport and begin our instrument flight journey so I can join my friends in Monterey, California to go spearfishing. This is the second part of the IFR in the Golden State, where we go through the IFR departure using ground-based navigation out of the busy California airspace. Feel free to check out the part 1 where I briefed today's flight plan and went through all the charts and preparation just like a real pilot would do. If you're ready like I'm ready, let's jump into my Cessna 172. After a restful sleep and a thorough flight plan last night, I arrived at the transient parking in San Luis Obispo and found my Cessna parked unharmed. I loaded my spearfishing gear and did a thorough pre-flight and made sure that we have enough fuel so we can land at Monterey with 45 minutes reserve fuel on top of that. We're running a couple minutes late than I anticipated, but luckily there is no bad weather waiting for us in Monterey, California. Alright, so let's get started with departure briefing on our before engine start checklist. Our departure procedure includes a normal takeoff with creep 3 departure to transition at Paso Robles, then Victor 25 to wiggle to join instrument approach procedure at Monterey. We have more than required fuel and climb gradients and have dual VOR receivers and radios as well as ELT. Pre-flight inspection completed, seats are secure, fuel selector valve is on both, shutoff valve is on. Make sure idle, throttle, quarter-inch, circuit breakers are all checked in, electrical equipment are off besides the beacon light. Standard battery is testing. And arm. Engine instruments are showing no red X's. We have our essential bolts are showing 24 above, mean is less than 1.5. Standby battery annunciator check. We're going to start our masters and start priming our engine. Fuel pump off, make sure idle. We're going to look around us and do clear prop and start our magnetos and make sure in. Throttle 1000 RPM, taxi lights and nav lights are on. We have 28 volts on both mean and essential with positive amp, avionics on, check the current database which is current, lean the mixture and flaps up. Oil pressure is in the green, oil temperature is rising. Next thing we'll do will be getting the weather from the airport. As you can see on our frequency, COM 1 and 2, we have ground and tower on COM 1 and weather on COM 2, exactly where I left it on the last trip. So let's go ahead and listen to the weather.
Initial contact, you have information Lima. San Luis Tower 80 for Lima, special report 1614 observation, wind 120 at 3, visibility 10. 1,900 scattered, temperature 15, dew point 7, altimeter 299er. Visual approaches runway 29er in use. Notice to airmen, self-service fuel is out of service. Caution for increased bird activity around the airport. Advise initial contact, you have information Lima.
Alright, so we have the ADAS, altimeter 299er2, and there's some birds in the vicinity. Runway is 29er. Just like what we expected during our pre-flight, so we're going to take a look at that departure procedure later on. Next up, let's write down what we know for our IFR clearance and then give them a call to pick up our IFR flight plan. So we know our destination will be clear to Monterey, and followed by that we filed for the Paso Robles vortex and the wiggle on Victor 25. Since our flight is generally a westward direction, so we're going to use even number. Our filed altitude will be 6,000. Let's go ahead and check our departure frequency, which would be Santa Barbara approach and departure 127.72. And now we pre-filled our craft clearance. Let's give the ground a call and pick up our IFR clearance. San Luis Ground Cessna 258 Juliet Tango at transient parking ready to pick up IFR Lima. Cessna 258 Juliet Tango, you're clear to Mike Romeo Yankee via Creep 3 departure, Paso Robles transition, then as filed. Climb and maintain 3000, expect 605 minutes after departure. Departure frequency 127.725 squawk, 3746. We're clear to Monterey via the Creep 3 departure, Paso Robles transition, wiggle, then as filed. Climb maintain 3000, expect 605 minutes after departure. Departure frequency 127.725, squawk 3746, November 258 Juliet Tango. 8 Juliet Tango, read back correct. Alright, that wasn't so hard. We have our transponder 3746, so we'll put that in right now. Alright, now we're gonna call ground again to get our taxi instruction. San Luis ground, Cessna 258 Juliet Tango at transient parking, ready to taxi with Lima. 258 Juliet Tango, runway 29, taxi via Alpha Alpha 8. Runway 29, Alpha Alpha 8, 8 Juliet Tango. 8 Juliet Tango, read back correct. Alright, seemed easy enough. We just make a left turn, join taxiway Alpha, and then all the way taxi down to Alpha 8. We'll have our taxi diagram with us and parking brake release. And start to roll. Now it seems like no one's behind us. We're just gonna make a turn to the right and line up at the whole short line, do our run up. Alright, so first thing we want to do is to take a look at the instrument departure procedure. We'll be using the San Luis localizer until reaching Crepe on a 290 radio, and then we'll make a right hand turn tracking radio 196 from Paso Robles. A quick note on the altitude depicted on the graph. As you can see, from Crepe to Paso Robles says 5,000 feet. Unless we received a climb via the SIDS, we're not going to pay attention to any altitude depicted on the procedure. In this case, since our clearance mentioned expect 6,000 after 05 minutes, that's what we're going to assume. Under the notes, we can see the minimum climb gradient is 275 feet per nautical miles to 1700. We can definitely make that in our Cessna's 172. During VFR conditions, which is today, we'll be keep an eye out for the coming opposing traffic, and this procedure is only for runway 29. Moving on to the route description, we'll be taking off from runway 29, climb via the San Luis localizer west course to intercept Crepe. Then transition to the Paso Robles, which says from over Crepe intersection via the Paso Robles radio 196 to Paso Robles. I want to point out the important context under the route description, where we read from over Crepe intersection. Flying over versus flying by are two different things. In this case, we have to fly on top of the Crepe intersection before joining 196 to Paso Robles vortex. Now, since we're using the grain needle to fly the entire route, I'm able to manually overwrite, but if we're using the GPS and on autopilot, the GPS is not gonna fly over the Crepe intersection. It's going to draw a curve to fly by. But it's important to know, especially in California and busy metropolitan areas, If the departure procedure involves flying over a certain fix or nav 8, and the immediate waypoint on your flight plan is almost a sharp turn, the GPS is not going to fly over the waypoint. And that could cause some complications since the departure procedure specifically mentioned flying over. It could be avoiding an airspace, it could be giving you time to reach certain altitude, or it's an ATC doing a time control for the traffic flow. Then you might be putting yourself in an unnecessary dangerous situation. One last note on this instrument departure procedure. You can see that we're actually using the San Luis Obispo localizer going outbound. So we have to treat it kind of like a back course approach. What that means for us in this HSI equipped airplane is we set the course to 290, we're gonna have reverse sensing. But then if we set the course to 110, the opposite of our departure heading, then we won't have the reverse sensing. Compared to a conventional CDI needle, no matter if you set the course to be 290 or 110, you will always have to have the reverse sensing, so turn the opposite of the needle. Alright, that was a lot on this departure plate. Let's get back to our cockpit. So in the background, I've been entering our flight plan into our GPS. Since we're not using the GPS to fly our routes today, it's still a good idea to have the GPS set up for situational awareness. Now we're going to set up our nav1 to have the San Luis localizer on active and the Paso Robles vortex on standby. We're also going to set the Paso Robles vortex on nav2 active for monitoring purposes. And then we're going to go to our PFD options to turn on our DME and put the nav1 under the DME monitoring. And then the bearing 1 will be nav2 to monitor the Paso Robles vortex. It's important to know that San Luis Obispo localizer is not coupled with the DME. So the purpose of opening up the DME is later on when we're doing the approach at Monterey, we might be using the DME. So now it's not a bad idea to put it on display. I like to use nav1 as the actual navigation source, and nav2 is just for monitoring purposes. We're going to set our initial altitude to 3000 and then set our heading to our runway heading 290. Another fact about runway heading is that the painted number on the runway is the closest cardinal direction of the runway rounded up to the whole number. But in our case, the actual runway heading is 290, so we're in luck. As I'm doing my instrument cross-check, I found out my transponder code has been resetted. So let's put the correct one back in. And then we're going to switch our needle to nav1 instead of GPS so we can actually receive the localizer. It is crucial to set the CDI needle the front course direction, even though we're flying outbound from a front course localizer. It is the same principle as we're on a back course approach. By setting the CDI direction to front course, we can avoid reverse sensing. That is, of course, only applicable if we have HSI installed on our airplane. If we have a traditional CDI needle, we always have to fly away from the needle to be on track. At this point, we have everything set up in our G1000, so let's give tower a call and be on our way. San Luis Tower, Cessna 258 Juliet Tango, hold short, runway 29 ready. 258 Juliet Tango, runway 29 clear for takeoff, no delay. Runway 29 clear for takeoff, 8 Juliet Tango. Alright, landing lights and strobe lights on, transponder code verified, make sure full rich. Final is clear. Runway 29 verified, full throttle. Center line, engine instruments are in the green, airspeed alive. 55 rotate. Since we're flying outbound out of the localizer, chasing the needle at this point is not our priority, since the localizer at this point is very sensitive. So the best course of action is just to maintain the runway heading 290 and hand fly it without chasing the needle. In a moment, we're going to reach 1,200 feet, which is 1,000 feet AGL. So above that, we can then throw in our autopilot. So we're going to probably set up the autopilot mode to flight level change and set for 80 knots. And then we're going to throw on back course before turning on the autopilots. We're going to continue monitoring the autopilot, make sure it's doing the right thing. And then we're going to wait for the tower to hand us over to Santa Barbara approach. Cessna 258 Juliet Tango, contact Santa Barbara approach on 127.725. Good day. Over to departure on 2772, 8 Juliet Tango. Have a good one. Santa Barbara departure, Cessna 258 Juliet Tango is 2,200 climbing 3,000 via the Creep 3 departure. 258 Juliet Tango, roger. Local altimeter 29099er. On the local airliner climbing through your course, we'll get you up to 6 shortly. 29099er, thanks for your help. 8 Juliet Tango. Remember, 258 Juliet Tango climbing team 6,000. 6,000, 8 Juliet Tango. Alright, at this point of the video, we're all set up to climb to our cruise altitude at 6,000 via the Creep 3 departure. I'm gonna end the video for now since we're entering into the en route segment of the flight. Hope you're enjoying the flight so far and learned something cool from a real-world IFR departure. And I certainly hope to see you for the rest of the flight on future episodes. So long!